Capitol Report is a production of Senate Media Services.
This week, lawmakers of both parties and both legislative bodies talk about their efforts to legalize sports betting in Minnesota, plus a look into the often overlooked symbols embedded in the Minnesota State Capitol. Stay tuned for this week's Capitol Report. Welcome to this week's program. I'm Shannon Loehrke. According to House Commerce Committee Chair Zack Stephenson, making sports betting legal in Minnesota would be the most significant change in Minnesota's gaming laws in many years. I spoke with him this week about his efforts to have Minnesota join a majority of other states who have legalized sports betting. As chair of the House Commerce Committee, you are in a key position to advance legislation that would legalize sports betting in Minnesota. You recently told reporters that last session you didn't have the time for this, that the budget and COVID were just too important, but that this year Minnesotans want this and that change is coming. Why is this the year to make significant changes to Minnesota's gaming laws?
Well, Shannon, thanks for having me here today to talk about this issue. You know, the Supreme Court in 2018 struck down the federal ban on states legalizing sports betting. So that wasn't that long ago. That was 2 or 3 years ago at this point. And they've been an eventful several years. But what's changed here in Minnesota is that all of our neighbors, every single state that touches Minnesota and Canada, have now all legalized sports betting. So you go in any direction out of Minnesota and people can engage in legal and safe sports betting, which they can't do in Minnesota. I think Minnesotans deserve the same opportunities that people in Wisconsin and Iowa and Canada have. And so I'd like to see sports gambling legalized in Minnesota.
At the November press conference where you talked about your interest in proposing this legislation, you referred to the black and gray markets that are currently being utilized by Minnesotans. Now, I'm someone who doesn't gamble and I rarely watch sports because I feel like every time I do, the team that I'm cheering for loses. So it's unclear to me what these black and gray markets are and what would be different than if sports betting were legalized. So what exactly are we talking about here?
Well, Shannon, you just described the experience of being a Minnesota sports fan. Every time you watch a game, the team you're cheering for loses. So, you know, right now, there are a lot of black and gray market solutions that Minnesotans do employ if they want to gamble on sports. There are websites that are hosted offshore like Bovada, where you can wager on sports illegally, and there are digital workarounds that you can employ to do it from Minnesota. How it would work in Minnesota if we legalize sports is still very much up in the air. There's a lot of different models. You know, 32 states have legalized sports gaming across the country. That means there's 32 different models that we could take a look at. And I think there's questions. You know, it could be that you need to go to a tribal casino to place a wager in person. Or it could be that you could have a mobile app on your phone that you could use to wager on sports. Both of those models have been employed by states that touch Minnesota, and they're both models that we're looking at right now.
You said that legalizing sports betting should not be considered a way to raise revenue, and that if you did employ it as a revenue-raising way of increasing the state's coffers, then it would just become prohibitively expensive and the black and the gray market would continue to operate. I've read about gambling sites called FanDuel and DraftKings, and they offer can't lose deals to attract new customers. The New York Times recently published a piece about the free-for-all that's occurring nationwide. You mentioned the 32 states that have currently some form of legalized sports betting. So we're talking about now national movement. We've got marketing, we've got media companies, we've got tech entrepreneurs. Will the state of Minnesota be in competition then with national, gambling sites?
No, we won't be in competition. I think it's up in the air now. We might allow companies like that to operate in Minnesota, perhaps in partnership with our tribal governments. In Iowa, for example, there are 19 companies like FanDuel and DraftKings that operate and compete for consumers down there, and that's where you see a lot of those deals that you're talking about. But I don't see any venture where the state creates its own system. I think we're much more likely to partner with the people who understand gambling in Minnesota. You know, our tribal governments have been operating gaming in Minnesota for 40 years without any scandal, without any problems. When you go into a casino in Minnesota, a tribal casino, you can have confidence that your wager is fair, that the deck isn't stacked against you, that no one's cheating you. And we want the same experience for people when they're engaged in sports betting, that they can have confidence. I mean, that's really one of the big reasons to do this, is to provide consumer protection that people don't have when they're wagering in these offshore accounts or these digital, these shady websites and digital workarounds. If they get cheated, there's no one for them to turn to. And that's a big problem for Minnesotans that we'd like to solve.
So one of the aspects that you're really interested in here is the consumer protection piece.
That's right. I think that, you know, I'm a prosecutor when the legislature is not in session. So I do kind of think about consumer protection and making sure that we have a safe and fair marketplace is a big part of my responsibility as we open up this new market for Minnesotans.
And then in terms of the revenue piece, the state would take a percentage of any of these transactions that are going on, regardless of how it's done. Is that how it would work?
Again, you know, I hate to be so elusive here, but it's going to depend on how we structure it. You know, if we do have a mobile marketplace where people are able to wager across the state, then there probably would be a tax component. As you said a minute ago, I'd like to keep that as small as possible because I really want to encourage people to move from those shady websites and digital workarounds into the legitimate market. And if we increase the tax rate too high, the competitiveness will force people to go back to those black market sites. There just isn't going to be that much money generated by this in terms from tax revenue anyway. You know, sports gaming is a high volume, low margin business. So you wouldn't see a lot of tax revenue coming, even if we set the rates very high. Important to note that the state does have a $7.7 billion surplus. So I'm not sure that we're really on the hunt for a lot of new revenue right now, but we do want to make sure that the consumer protection aspect that I mentioned, the regulatory aspect, is funded by the activity itself. I think that's important. And then the other thing is that we know that some people have a problem with gaming. You know, gambling addiction is a very real problem. And we know that increasing access to gaming probably will increase problem gambling. So I would like to see a portion of the revenue generated by sports gaming go to problem gaming programming. We do a similar thing with the lottery, for example.
And you mentioned the tribes a minute ago. You've said that it's important to you. I know it's important to your caucus to make sure that you engage with them because they, as you say, are operating, you know, gambling operations, and this would add to that. How are those conversations going?
Well, Minnesota has 11 tribal governments, and they are all across the state, all the way from Grand Portage over to the Red River Valley, down to the Minnesota River Valley. And I think it's really important for me to speak in person to all of them. And I have been working very hard to do that. I'm up to 7 so far. I've got 2 more calendared. I'm hoping to get to all 11 before the start of session. We're having really thoughtful, productive conversations. I think things are moving in a positive direction. I'm really hopeful that before we get to session that we'll have a consensus approach to this issue, but it's still a work in progress at this point.
When you announced this back in November, you said it's 90 days until session, and I want to have a bill ready when session comes around. So here we are, just a few weeks shy of the legislative session. Can you give me any kind of preview of what you think is going to be in this bill?
It's still my goal to have a bill ready at the start of session or very close to it that legalizes sports betting. I'm more optimistic than ever that we'll get this done this year, but I do think it's really important for me to continue those conversations with the tribal governments and the other stakeholders. I don't want to, you know, we talked about the tribal government, but there's a lot of stakeholders. And that's the reason why we made the announcement 90 days out, because we wanted to make sure that everybody who wanted to have their voice heard on this issue had an opportunity to participate. So I've been talking to the tribes, but also to our sports teams, also to the racetracks, also have a meeting scheduled at the university, also with private companies that work in this space. You mentioned FanDuel and DraftKings, but there's other companies that do like data legitimacy work. And so there's a lot of discussions to be had. We've had a really productive couple of months as I try to balance, you know, my part-time legislative responsibilities with my full-time job as a prosecutor for Hennepin County. But we're making good progress, and I'm still optimistic that we'll have a bill early in session.
Representative Zack Stephenson, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Over the last few years, bipartisan efforts that would allow sports betting in Minnesota have stalled, but signs are pointing to a potential break in the logjam in the coming legislative session. Senator Roger Chamberlain has spearheaded some of the recent efforts to legalize sports betting, and he joins me now in the studio. Welcome.
Good morning.
Morning. Good morning. Yes, it's morning, just barely. This is the perfect time of year to talk about legalized sports betting because the NFL playoffs and the Super Bowl are just around the corner. If it were legal in Minnesota right now, what would that mean for folks?
Well, it means that they wouldn't have to do it illegally, number one, because all of them, they are betting, and they are betting illegally. So if we had it in Minnesota, first they'd be doing it legally, and those people that are not allowed to vote to participate, the younger people, they would not be doing it. So that's the first part. Secondly, is people could go to the tribal casinos or the two racetracks, Canterbury or Running Aces, and they could sit in beautiful sports books, watch a number of screens and TVs, and they could place bets on their games in any way they want, just like they do in many other states and like they're doing now, except they don't have the beautiful sports books. And it's again, like we've been saying for years, it's a win-win for the tribes, for the people, for the state. It's just fun. It's being done already. It's just a fun thing to do.
Now, you're talking about going to a place and sitting and watching. So we're talking about brick and mortar. We're not talking about mobile at this point in time.
Thank you for clarifying that. No, it would be mobile too. I like going to a sports book. They're fun. They're around a lot of people. They're great places. But mobile will be part of it as well. So you go to the brick and mortar, or you would be doing it on your phone as well. Now you have to go to the sports book to create an account to recharge your account. But after your account is charged or you've recharged it, you would not have to go there. But a lot of people like to go to them.
So when I was new to the Senate, I spoke with you about some legislation that you'd been working on for many years that had to do with dyslexia. And I asked you the question, why did it take so long? And you laughed. And so here we are in 2022. The Supreme Court, allowed sports betting in the United States back in 2018. We've been talking about this for a while. It is taking time, as often legislation does. But as we've moved along, what have you learned about the process? Like, what's an absolute no and what's probably a go in terms of some of the issues that have stalled these efforts?
I'll laugh again. It's always politics, right? It's always politics, and politics means money, right? That's what it is. So back in 2018, Representative Garofalo, I will give credit to, he was on this. He's a big fan of it. And I talked to him it was near end of session after the ruling came out. And I spoke with him then. And we've been working on it since then. We've been positive. We've been optimistic. And what's a go and no go? We need to have mobile. It needs to be at the two racetracks and the casinos. And I think it'll work. I mean, I've been saying that for years, so have some other people, that it's a win-win. So it's politics holding it up. The tribes were slow stepping, and a lot of the Democrats weren't going to move on that. So.
And that may be about to change. So we're talking about the state of Minnesota allowing this, but it's also big business across the nation. According to the American Gaming Association, 30 states plus the District of Columbia now have some amount of live sports betting going on. The industry is growing at a remarkable rate, with betting content now even being incorporated into pregame shows. How would the state compete against the tech companies who are moving so quickly to capitalize on this?
Well, maybe I'm missing something, but I don't think the state's competing necessarily against the tech companies. The state is competing against other states for that, because like I said earlier, this is being done illegally. People are placing bets and running bets in violation of what we have now in the state, like a violation of the law. But I lost track of the question. Shit.
Well, the question is about big tech and
Oh,
about,
big tech, right.
you know, what is the impact, you know, because revenue is an issue, and it's my next question. So maybe we can loop this together. How important is revenue, and who gets the revenue?
I really don't know that the state's in competition with the tech companies. We have a tech company here that is a major player, based in Minnesota, a major player in sports betting and stats. It was startup here. A New York company bought them out, but the bulk of the work is done here. So I don't know. We're in competition with the tech companies, but typically what will happen is we'd legalize it. We negotiate. Maybe we have to negotiate compacts. Depends how the language in the bill is. And then the tribes or in the two tracts would maybe hire their own management company to do it. And the language in the bill would kind of lay out where that, you know, the infrastructure goes, right? Part of the infrastructure of the mobile is important. Who owns that? Who has a license to it? So we're not really in competition with the tech companies. We're in competition with other states, and just to allow people to have some fun. And yes, there is a big business, so people make money on it. That as well.
And your answer to that question does highlight the multiple moving parts that are involved with this effort. Some have said this will be a moneymaker for the state. Others have said that's not really the issue. What's your view on the revenue piece in terms of legalizing? Does it raise a lot of money, or do we not care about that?
Well, you know, back when we started this, Representative Garofalo and I, we have been saying for years, this is not a multi-billion-dollar thing for the state. If the tax is too high, people are going to continue to still do it illegally, and it won't be profitable. We had to work with the tribes to make sure that there's revenue coming into the state. We had to cover the cost of administration and oversight, and but beyond that, I don't know how much it's going to be. At its peak, when Nevada was the king, right? I remember a couple of years ago we took a trip out there. That was $5 billion, and that was just the gross. So, and that's not what the state takes in. That's just the gross handle, right? That's just the gross bet. So now it's much bigger than that across the country. So there's been a lot of different estimates. The state, I think the gross, it'll take a while for us to get up to $5 billion if we ever get to that point, and I don't know that we would.
Well, and I saw that Iowa was just $240 million for 2020, so it's
right, and
it's
that's
smaller.
a gross handle. That's not the net tax revenue to the state. The next tax, it's hard to say what the net tax revenue is to the state, but it's got to be enough to cover a few million to cover operations of the agency that's going to have oversight, and then extra money to go, you know, to various things.
Senator Roger Chamberlain, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The Minnesota State Capitol is rich with symbols, many of which go unnoticed. Brian Pease of the Minnesota Historical Society helps bring them to the forefront in our occasional series, The People's House. Minnesota State Capitol has a lot for a visitor to take in, from the art, from the variety of stonework, from the grandeur of the spaces. But for those people that are really interested in details, there's some symbols that they could search for. Can you talk about the symbols in the Capitol?
Yeah, sure. Cass Gilbert, who was the architect of the Capitol, and also Elmer Garnsey was the chief decorator, put all kinds of Minnesota symbols throughout the decoration. And a lot of these places you have to look real close, because you might walk by them if you worked here for years, for instance. If you don't look at the details, sometimes you walk by all these symbols for many, many years. And so you'll see lady slippers and North Stars, and there are gophers, because we're the gopher state. And they're interspersed and interlaced in all the decoration throughout the state capitol.
There's some threads that tie the outside to the inside in terms of symbols, the letter M and some of the braids of agricultural products. Where are they outside and where are they inside?
On the outside, you'll see on the exterior, especially around the front entrance, you'll see lion's heads. And when you see a lion's head with its mouth open, it represents authority. And then you'll see above that, you'll see eagles around the dome, and those are represented, of course, eagles from the national government, so we're part of this United States. And then in between the eagles and those columns, you'll see beautiful carved stones of lady slippers, and so those are ringing the dome. So once again, as you're walking up those front steps, you get this idea of the sense of prosperity and progress of the state. You have that gold horses in the front that represents the prosperity and the progress. Plus you'll see wreaths and festoons of products, agricultural products that were an important part of recognizing Minnesota's economy and its wealth from 1900.
So if you were to come inside the Capitol and look for eagles, where might you find some eagles?
You'll find them everywhere. You can go to the Rathskeller. There are eagles down in the Rathskeller cafeteria. You can go to the ground floor. There are some in the decorations of the pedestals. You'll see them in the first and second floor. You'll see them in just about every chamber. There's a representation of an eagle. Once again, establishing the importance of that federal government and the importance of being part of the United States.
As you approach the front of the Capitol, there's a letter M on either side. M plays a big part in this Capitol.
Yeah, M's are, of course, representing Minnesota. So as that visitor, you want to see that this is Minnesota's state capital. So you'll see letter M's not only in the front of the building, and you'll see them in the railings, in a cipher they call it. You'll see letter M's even in the points of the star, the North Star in the rotunda. And you'll see M's all throughout the decorations in the ceilings, the stencil work and so forth in the House chamber. And once again, what Cass Gilbert and Elmer Garnsey are establishing is this is Minnesota's state capital. So you always want to remind people Minnesota has all these things that you can learn about or be a part or have that culture and that industry and that agriculture to understand us as a state in 1900.
The lady slipper, which is Minnesota's state flower, can be found both outside and inside at the top of the columns. Where else can we find the lady slipper?
As you walk up those front steps, you'll see, you have to look closely because they're quite a distance above you, but in those capitals, the Corinthian capitals, right dead center is the lady slipper, and that's also found in the third floor. When you look at the top of the capitals throughout the building, you'll see these lady slippers, and they're in the railing. Where there's a third floor railing that you have to stand on the second floor to look up to see those lady slippers. They're in some of the stencil work and the decoration of the house, and so that's once again an important state flower from the 1900s that is still an important part of us recognizing. You know, I think we're the only state that has a pink and white showy lady slipper, so that's a unique decorative detail in the state capitol.
Minnesota is known as the Gopher State, and it's because of a railroad scandal that happened in the 1850s. Tell us the story of how Minnesota became to be known the Gopher State.
Yeah, that was one of the first big political controversies or scandals in the state's history. And in fact, that all was taking place even before we became a state. Minnesota was given railroad grants from the U.S. government, and they added that grant legislation as a rider to a gopher and blackbird eradication bill. And so it was like eradicate gophers and blackbirds, and these land grants are given to the state of Minnesota to develop its industrial resources with railroads and so forth. But when we became a state, the Constitution said we could only borrow $250,000. And in order to build the railroads, the investors were saying we need more money. So they changed the Constitution just a few months after it was adopted to make that loan agreement to $5 million. And so what happened is they gave grants and money to all these different railroad agencies, and then there was a huge economic depression, sucked out all the investments out of Minnesota, and so for that $5 million, there wasn't 1 mile of railroad built. So that was a political scandal. So there was a St. Paul druggist or cartoonist who drew up a cartoon showing the railroad men dressed as gophers trying to influence the people, and they were pulling a car full of legislators to the end of a railroad track that went to the Slough of Despond, which is a Pilgrim's Progress reference. And so it's basically, you know, the railroads being held up by the backs of legislators who were bribed. So the heaviness of the gold sacks are pulling them down, and the railroads built on top of them. So that cartoon was pretty popular, and that's how we became known as the Gopher State.
And so where can those gophers be found in this building?
They're, once again, like stars, not as common, but you'll see them in the same railings. You'll see the lady slippers and the eagles. You'll see them carved in the House retiring room, which is not available to the public, unfortunately, but there's two little gophers sitting on their hind legs there, Those are the same things you'll see in the railings. They're also found in the gates. And those were added in the 1970s outside the chambers. And so you'll see them on their hind legs at the top of the gates. And so that's kind of a fun way of bringing in, you know, what Minnesota was recognized for even in 1900 was the Gopher State and the North Star State.
Well, let's talk about the North Star, because at the very top of the dome, it's adorned with zodiac symbols. Do those carry any special significance?
Yeah, they're representing more of the stars, the constellations. So the idea that Gilbert was trying to create was, as you're standing in the first floor of the rotunda, where there's a large North Star emblazoned in marble, but also in brass and glass, if you look up, you'll see, you know, these signs of the zodiac, which would be the stars above. And then some people say that large chandelier could be seen as a North Star as well, because that's a guiding light. And that was the idea that Henry Sibley wanted when he came up with that model for the brand new state of Minnesota in 1858. Is we're the northernmost state at that time, and plus a North Star is a light that people can follow. And so the idea is follow our lead as a new state.
So there's a lot of detail to be discovered in the Capitol. How much of this is pointed out in a tour?
Yeah, a lot of it is something that is first and foremost as people walk through the spaces, and the tour guides are very good at pointing out some of those little clever details. Depending on the type of group, on the type of stories that guide might be talking about, because we don't really have a scripted tour. Each guide will have some different things and nuances they'll put into their tours to make it unique and individual. But yeah, you'll see obviously that North Stars in the rotunda. You might point out the gophers in the railings and the lady slippers, and you'll see all kinds of the agricultural products just as you walk through the building. And so the spaces the tour groups go to pretty much hit all these areas where you can, as that viewer, kind of ingest all that agricultural products that you see as a visual reminder throughout the building.
Was it common practice when this Capitol was being designed and built to have this level of detail found throughout a building like this?
Yeah, I think in this time period, what you're creating is this Italian Renaissance style building. And so you're bringing some of those decorative elements and details into the building. So the arabesques, which would be on the first floor stencils, are very kind of flowers and products of the state. And if you went to Italy, it might be a different type of decor there, because they're, you know, promoting what they have to offer, whereas Cass Gilbert and Elmer Garnsey made the decorations here very Minnesota focused. So you're going to see corn more than you would, say, apples or grapes in some other, you know, location in other parts of the United States or Europe. And so that's what makes the building really neat to look at. Is it's a Italian Renaissance inspired building, but it has to represent Minnesota's values and its history and its economy at the same time.
Join us again next week as we delve into more topics affecting Minnesotans. I'm Shannon Loehrke, and on behalf of all of us at Senate Media Services, thanks for watching.